In this week's episode of RT Issues, I talked with Julian Vickers, Erin Kady, and Spencer Moazed about China's recent ban of video games to 3 hours only on weekends. Let's take a look. How do you guys feel about China's decision to do this?
I think that they're kind of overreaching a little bit, but of course that's what China's very notorious for, being kind of a government where privacy is more of a second thought to security, and I guess they've deemed this to be maybe a threat to their security or a threat to their youth. So
I think as far as the security measures go, I do think it is a little overreaching. But for the mental health aspect, though, I do feel that 3 hours is a very short amount of time. I think perhaps a restriction isn't the worst possible thing, but I do think that the time that they've given is a little too short.
Some people would argue that this is an example of government overreach. How much control should government have over the personal lives of its citizens?
well, speaking as an American who's used to freedom, I think especially Americans can be a little entitled when it comes to having freedom sometimes, but in this case definitely this is a case of overreach. This should be the job of a parent, not of a government, to regulate what your kid is doing. It should be a parent's decision, not the government.
It's definitely overreaching. It's limiting like creativity, and I definitely agree that it's a mental health issue, but it's almost like they're controlling your creativity.
Some people would argue that the US faces a similar problem of children spending too much time on video games. How would a similar law work for our country?
To be frank, I just don't think it would work.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Erin. There's no chance this would go well in America. We've had much minor things create massive issues. An overreach like this would go down horribly here. It's just normal in China, but certainly is not here.
In somewhere like China, it's almost the norm to have these kinds of regulations that are very strict on their citizens. But in America, as Spencer said earlier, we're just used to these freedoms, and if something like this were to take effect, I just simply don't think it would work, and I think people would try to rebel.
If we were to set like a law in place, I feel like people would find a way to rebel it and find a way to bypass the law.
Even though it seems impractical for the United States, there is evidence that video games are causing emotional and even physical damage to our youth. How do you feel about that?
We have to look at it, although correlation is not equal causation, there is a huge growth in the amount of mental health issues in our youth, and it's happened throughout time, and throughout time as technology has advanced, as video games have gotten further advanced, there is a correlation between the two. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily related, but I do think that technology in general has perhaps affected the mental health of the youth.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I think that if you think video games cause mental problems, another big thing we should look at is social media, which arguably is much worse for people's mental health. You know, having likes and everything, posting pictures of yourself, people commenting, etc., is arguably much more detrimental to one's social health. And I can't imagine a social media ban would go down nearly as well as this video game ban has gone.
I definitely agree with the social media issue.
I do agree that it affects mental health, but it definitely affects physical health too. Just like sitting in a chair for hours on end can definitely like affect like even like the way you walk and things like that.
While I don't personally agree with China's restriction at all, I do think that video games and technology in general could have an effect on mental health. So while I don't agree with it, I do see where it is coming from.
Maybe it should just be the job of a parent and not of a government.